Serious, what folklore urban legend legitimately scares you? Mimics. Specifically ones who can mimic voices. I don't know what about them is so scary to me, but all the stories about camping in the woods and hearing your own voice is just chilling. Honestly, I don't know that I would really recognize my voice if it wasn't coming from me. Tall hitchhikers, sometimes called stick Indians in Native American folklore. If you look back through some AskReddit posts about traveling, you'll see stories about people being on desolate highways dozens of miles from anything, and they encounter people who appear to be hitchhikers. They look normal, are dressed normal, etc., except that they tend to be around 9 feet tall or more. I used to be a touring musician. I've seen some weird crap on the road, but that would freak me out, and I really can't even figure out why. Well, why not share some of those stories? I always wonder when I see people like you around what their deal is. I'm sure we'd all love to hear. Surprised I don't see this here yet, but freaking kelpies. Water spirits that mostly turn into horses, occasionally humans, that crave human company. Usually, the humans ends up drowned and eaten with their entrails spread everywhere. No thank you. The way I've heard kelpie stories is, they appear as a beautiful black horse, inviting you to climb on. Once you are on, it takes off towards a body of water and gets in deep. You drown. The kelpie eats you. It's not even the idea of getting lured by a malicious fairy that scares me, but imagine, a meat-eating horse. Somehow, that terrifies me. Oh. When I was at MT Koyazan in 2014, there was an old well in the big cemetery that had a sign posted in front of it. Sign said, essentially, that if you look into the well water and don't see your reflection, you'll die within 3 years. I am not a superstitious man nor am I spiritual, but you better believe I did not look. My friend did though, and I refused to hear what he saw. He's still with us, in case you're wondering. Yeah, frick that. The Nuculavi, a creature that looks like a horse and rider fused together, legless human torso attached to the horse's back, entirely skinless, bleeds black blood, has glowing red eyes like flames, long arms that reach the ground, a head on the human torso that lolls back and forth as if its neck is broken, and its breath causes plagues and blights. It hangs out near beaches, and when it isn't murdering people it causes rough seas and nasty weather. Basically its only weakness is fresh water, which it cannot tolerate. Thank you, Northern Scotland, for having thought up this demon. Bloody Mary, even though it's supposedly a stupid urban legend, I can't fathom locking myself in a pitch black tiny room and saying her name 3 times. I know logically she's not gonna pop up and murder me, but I ain't taking the chance. I tried it as a kid, saw red in the mirror, after images from pressing against my closed eyelids, I imagine, and ran screaming out of the bathroom. Skinwalkers. The fact that they can shapeshift to and from animal forms. The fact that they can sound like your loved ones. The fact that they are what they are because they ate human flesh. I'd put them up there with Wendigo. I thought Wendigos are the ones that are human flesh to turn into monsters. I read this SCP story about a curse bed that if you slept on it and had your feet outside of your blanket, a spirit would come and temporarily paralyze you, then slowly peel your toenails off while you sat there in massive pain, unable to scream. Needless to say, I'm super uncomfortable when I am not completely cocooned in my blanket now, lol. In India, there's a common urban legend where a lady in white tries to hitchhike late at night. If you stop, she will direct you to a cemetery and either disappear or kill you. And if you don't stop, she will run as fast as your car while staring at you through your window. Either that or she appears in your back seat. This used to haunt me when I was a kid. It does seem ridiculous now, but put yourself in the shoes of an 8-year-old. La Llorona. She drowned her children and now waits at bodies of water at night, crying, to frick people up. Every camping trip or overnight camp I went to as a kid involved me scouting out anything bigger than a puddle to judge whether or not I could go out at night. I avoided any body of water. My middle school teacher swears he saw her as a child. I'm glad I live in the desert. Bean nears a banshee. If you see her washing clothes in a body of water, then you will die shortly thereafter. As a kid, I read a story about 3 girls that ran into one in the woods and each died in a different horrifying way. They all tried desperately to avoid their fate but none did. I was scared of water for weeks. The version I heard of this was actually for soldiers going off to battle. Like if you were off on your way to a battle and you saw the banshee wash a woman washing bloody clothes, then you knew that you wouldn't live through it. The Tianak. Imagine seeing an innocent baby, then 3 seconds later it's on your face ripping it apart like a jockey from Left 4 Dead. Most Japanese folklore scares me, and it seems that in most Asian folklore, water wells are not a good thing. You either have a long neck lady that will eat you, Japan, vengeful spirit that will drag you to heck, most Asian, and most recently I just found out that original depictions of fairy folk aren't cute and nice like Tinkerbell. They are wicked and malicious, used humans for breeding purposes then suck their souls out for food. Celtic, Nordic and Malay. Scary stories involving wells make sense. It helps in scaring the children away from them, avoiding accidents. Banshees terrified me when I was younger, 8 or 9 or something. We were told about them at school and the stories unsettled me a bit because they were mostly about a woman you might see, and if you bothered her, the main story I remember was stealing her comb. She became terrifying, screeching and wailing, and you'd be unable to stop her or anything. Then there were the stories about how you'd see one before you or somebody you loved died. Then there was an episode of Charmed where there was a banshee that would kill people when they were alone or scared. It made me even more afraid of being alone in the dark. Also, the fact that their scream killed you made me feel helpless because how do you even avoid that? I think it was Darby O'Gill and the Little People, where the banshee was so not threatening and really easily avoided when I got over it. Also the It's the Wail of the Banshee. Bran is a joke for my friends and me. Now I just think they're pretty cool. Don't know if it can be called an urban legend, but instances of people who woke up in their grave and tried to escape dying there. That is the one thought that scares me the most. Feel confident in the knowledge that it's impossible with modern body prep for the funeral, but that did happen to some people in the past. All those killer doll stories. The main ones I was told in school by older kids were 1. The one where the little girl is supposed to cut her doll's nails every day, but then she goes to her friend's house for a few days, and when she comes back home, there's the doll sitting in the middle of the living room, staring straight at her, with long, blood-stained nails and the remains of the girl's parents and siblings about her. Shudder. 2. The one where the little girl is supposed to lock her doll in her wardrobe every night, but then she doesn't, and at night, the doll, grinning maniacally, starts slowly swaying her arms from side to side, with her fingers shooting out one by one to stab the various family members in the heart. This one particularly horrified me because the girl had a baby brother like me, so it made me feel really protective. It also didn't help that I did have old-fashioned dolls in my bedroom. Also, I really hated the one about the legless lady that comes into the children's bedroom at night and murders the little sister who was sleeping in the lower bunk after her big sister wouldn't let her come up when she was scared. Again because of my own little brother. I hate dolls in general. Stories told around the fire at summer camp always affected me the most. The story of the watermelon baby stands out. The baby grew up with abusive parents who kept him locked up in the basement and only fed him watermelon every few days. Once he was older and harder to control, they allowed him to attend the nearby boys' summer camp. Due to neglect, he looked decrepit but had a massive head with a vertical scar resembling a line on a watermelon. He was incessantly teased for his looks, which ultimately prompted him to kill his fellow campers and counselors with an axe after a midnight gathering. What made this creepy and realistic to me was my camp had a lodge with pictures of all campers dating back to the early 1900s, and one kid from the 20s had a massive head with a very similar looking scar and scowl on his face. Story was that year was the only summer the camp had to end early. There's also an island close to the camp with a visible cabin where the watermelon baby still resides to this day. New counselors are selected to row out to the island at night to deliver the watermelon and deter any future murders. I heard this at a camp in New Hampshire, and I believe it's told in other states. I can't say it was the most original story, but dang, staring in the eyes of that kid in the picture made me a believer. Something about being away at summer camp as a kid makes you want to believe these stories are true. Bigfoot. I used to go camping every year with my family in the Mono Lake area. I had an older cousin that would go on these trips with us and he would ditch me on hikes and tell me Bigfoot was going to get me, or that his friend was walking his dog in the area and Bigfoot killed and ate his dog. I was 8 years old and petrified to leave the cabin. Frick you, Matt. Frick Matt. The man under the bed who licks your hand foot if it hangs over the edge of the bed. I'm 32 and cannot have any appendage hang over the side, ever. Probably should mention that it is supposed to be your dog. If you didn't have a dog and someone was looking for feet, it might be a red light. A teenage boy drove his date to a dark and deserted lover's lane for a makeout session. He turned on the radio for mood music, leaned over to whisper in the girl's ear, and began kissing her. Minutes later, the mood was broken when the music suddenly stopped mid-song. After a moment of silence, an announcer's voice came on, warning in an ominous tone that a convicted murderer had just escaped from the state insane asylum, which happened to be located within a half-mile of where they were parked, and urging that anyone who notices a man wearing a stainless steel hook in place of his missing right hand should immediately report his whereabouts to the police. The girl became frightened and asked to be taken home. The boy, feeling bold, locked all the doors instead and, assuring his date they would be safe, attempted to kiss her again. She became frantic and pushed him away, insisting that they leave. Relenting, the boy peevishly jerked the car into gear and spun its wheels as he pulled out of the parking space. When they arrived at the girl's house, she got out of the car and, reaching to close the door, began to scream uncontrollably. The boy ran to her side to see what was wrong, and there, dangling from the door handle, was a bloody hook. I feel like this story is missing the scratch part they initially hear, which is part of what makes it so creepy. A legend dating back to 1775 speaks of a whaling vessel that was discovered off the western coast of Greenland in October of that year. The details of the story change depending on where you read about it, so the ship's name might have been the Octavius or possibly the Gloriana. The earliest solid record of this tale can be traced back to a newspaper article in 1828. The story tells of how one Captain Warren discovered a whaler ship drifting through a narrow passage in the ice off the coast of Greenland. After hailing the vessel and receiving no reply, he brought his own ship near and the crew boarded the mysterious vessel. Inside though, they discovered a horrible sight. Throughout the ship, the entire crew was frozen to death where they sat. When Warren's crew explored further and found the captain's quarter, the scene inside was even more eerie. There in the cabin were more bodies. A frozen woman holding a dead infant in her arms. A sailor holding a tinderbox, as if trying to manufacture some semblance of warmth, and there, at the desk, was the ship's captain. One account tells of how his face and eyes were covered in a green, wet mold. In one hand, the man held a fountain pen and the ship's logbook was open in front of him. Captain Warren leaned over and read the final entry, dated November 11, 1762. 13 years prior to the ship's discovery. We have been enclosed in the ice 70 days, it read. The fire went out yesterday, and our master has been trying ever since to kindle it again, but without success. His wife died this morning. There is no relief. Captain Warren and his crew were so frightened by this encounter that they grabbed the ship's log and retreated as fast as they could, back to their own ship. The Octavius was never seen again. Imagine being there, slowly dying of bitter cold and watching others die around you, looking down at the blue face of an infant that will never reach adulthood, realizing there's no hope of escape. That gets me more than any kooky spoopy urban myth. I've heard of this and it's super unsettling. My friend told me about shadow people when I was in high school. She told me that she thought she had one in her room because she couldn't sleep at night and the end of her bed would feel dark and she felt like she was being watched, wasn't alone in the room anymore. How they show up during difficult times in your life. I thought just whatever, until I went home and started thinking about it. Suddenly I couldn't sleep, never felt alone in my room anymore, and the corner of my room looked much darker. Lasted for several months while I was super depressed. I probably freaked myself out and kind of imagined it, but I still think about that crap and it freaks me out a bit. And when I started feeling depressed and this presence in my room, my friend told me she didn't feel it anymore and started sleeping fine, like it moved onto me or something. Just kind of freaky. Everything surrounding the smiley face killer theory. It's not so much the idea of an actual killer that creeps me out, It's more so that drunk young men are so prone to drowning that really seems bizarre. I guess it makes sense though, although I can't believe how common it is. I live in Pittsburgh and we've had several young men disappear after leaving bars only to be found in the rivers weeks later. A lot of people think the smiley face killer is here. Anything to do with mirrors, Bloody Mary, Candyman, looking in mirrors, especially at night, absolutely terrifies me. The Missing 411 Conspiracy, a series of self-published books written by a cryptozoologist claiming there's a conspiracy involving the National Park Service around people who have gone missing in the wilderness. I understand that accidents can happen quickly and without warning, but, conspiracy or not, the number of people who just straight up go missing in the outdoors freaks me out. It's not uncommon to see missing persons flyers at local trailheads and on FB hiking groups. A lot of these people were very experienced and capable, well equipped, and hiking on popular trails. What happened to them? Did they see it coming? Will anyone ever find their remains? Probably we'll never know. The one about the Japanese demon girl who lives in every crack and crevice if you lock eyes with slowly and painfully rips out and consumes your soul, leaving only a pale, dead, empty husk of flesh where you once stood. That or Larry the Cable Guy. There was a campfire story someone told at summer camp once when I was a kid. It was about this foam on the lake that if it touched you, would completely absorb you. Freaked the heck out of me as a kid, and if there was any foam on open water anywhere, I wouldn't swim in that lake. Sounds like The Raft, a short horror story by Stephen King. It's a seriously gruesome and scary tale. I used to be a huge mythology buff when I was a kid, but I remember reading about axolotls and being so scared I didn't go near any bodies of water for months. It's like a dog monkey thing with quills that lives in rivers, lakes, but it has a functional hand at the end of its tail. It makes a crying sound like that of a child to lure people close to the water so it can pull you under with the tail hand. But even worse, when it eats you, it only eats the eyes, nails and teeth, and leaves the rest of the body intact. Also, I don't mess with no fairy circles. Like, I know it's probably not gonna transport me to the land of the Fae, but what if? I hate the urban legend about waking up in a bathtub of ice minus some kidneys. I am never likely to end up like this, nor do I have any reason to believe this is a thing that often happens to anyone. But goddamn it, I grew those myself and they're mine and you can't have them. I hate when this happens to me. In Germany there is supposedly a bird that screams like a human. If you hear the bird at night you will wake up dead. Shout out to my mom telling 10-year-old me this after watching The Ring in order to calm me down. Oh, the Slit-mouthed woman. It's a Japanese urban legend about this woman who wears a surgical mask, and if she sees you, she'll approach you and ask if you think she's beautiful. Regardless of your answer, she'll rip off the mask and scream, "Hey, am I beautiful now?" If you say yes, she'll take a pair of scissors and slit your mouth from ear to ear, so you'll look just like her. If you say no, I think she just hacks up your face. I don't remember. Yeah, that's about right. But the counter question is what saves you, or saying you have a prior arrangement, at which point she apologized for being rude. I can't think of a local legend. Half-hung Macnaghten. This one is a doozy and the actual tale is a lengthy one, but it's essentially about a wealthy 18th century Anglo-Irish lad who squanders his money away due to his gambling addiction, which lands him in trouble with authority. His first wife dies in childbirth. He marries his second wife, a 15-year-old, in a sham marriage that he insists is real but presents like a play of sorts to fool the girl's parents, since they disapproved of the idea of him marrying her because of his dodgy antics. They later found out about how seriously the couple treated the marriage and prevented them from seeing each other again, eventually taking the matter to court where the girl's family were awarded hundreds by the courts. Macnaghten fled to England to get away from the consequences of the court orders, but eventually returned to Ireland to kill the girl's parents so they could live happily ever after. However, when he goes to shoot the girl's father, she uses herself as a shield to protect him, killing her on the spot. He is sentenced to death, but because his story had already reached tragic romantic hero status among townsfolk, the hanging had to be entirely organized by the girl's family, including the building of the gallows. Many attend Macnaghten's hanging, many viewing him as a hero and others viewing him as a murderous criminal. The hanging is botched as McNaughton lands on his knees after plummeting through the platform. Rather than run away at the crowd's insistence, he yells something to the effect of "I will not be known as half-hung McNaughton." The second hanging attempt was successful, and hundreds of years later he is known as half-hung McNaughton. To add insult to injury, it sounds like a comment on his penis in modern context. Skinwalkers and Wendigos for sure. So weird to think that you could look at your dog one day and something looks off but you can't tell what, and later you're dead. You shudders. One of those Crybaby bridge stories. There are a million that go something like, one night many years ago, a woman was walking in the rain and dropped her baby over the edge of that bridge in a fit of despair. If you walk across that abandoned bridge at night, and it starts to rain, you'll hear the baby crying. There are a million Crybaby bridges around here and nobody can tell the story without someone else saying "Nah, she dropped the baby by accident and jumped in after him." At night they'll pull you into the water trying to get back up, or "Nah, she sacrificed it to the devil" or whatever. So it wasn't that scary until one night when I was in high school. My friends and I liked to smoke weed at the Crybaby Bridge way out in the country that was blocked off from traffic at the end of a long road through the woods. You have to pass several dead-end signs. Easy place to get away with it, right? As we pulled up one night we saw pentagrams in red all over the concrete barriers. We got out and saw there were more on the road and big splashes like someone did them drunk with a can of paint. We were a little uneasy, but figured it was just dumb kids and so we started smoking a little. My friend went into the roadside ditch that led down to the creek and found a dead calf with its throat slit. When I went to look I saw blood in pools and a stain leading down to the water. Definitely Slenderman. I get that the legend is only a decade old, doesn't help. I'm terrified of things in the uncanny valley. Most dolls, especially China dolls, and those cheap mannequins at places like Old Navy where they're human-like but the proportions are slightly wrong. Anytime I see a tall bull dude in a suit and tie, I can't stop sweating. For me, Slenderman has become so much of a meme that it's hard for me to take him seriously. There's a road in northern New Jersey, called Clinton Road, that is infamously known for paranormal activity. There was said to be KKK, Satanist, and witch activity along the road at times in history. It's famous for having ghost cars that will try and drive you off the road, and specifically at one bend where you can be driven off a bridge into a river. Also, there has been reports of a ghost boy on that same bridge and seeing strange creatures along the road. There's an old abandoned castle near the road where people have weird experiences and visions consistent with what people would consider demonic possession. In all reality, it's probably just a really long and creepy road that plays tricks on people's minds, but I'm not trying to go there to find out, especially with the supposed ghost cars. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.